Hi, everyone. Welcome to the August session of Youth Lead Now. My name is Abdul Ajeigbe, and I'm excited to be co-moderating this session today. I am a rising junior at Pomona College in Claremont, California, where I'm studying both computer science and media studies. However, I'm from Newark, New Jersey, and there I participated in the Aspen Young Leaders Fellowship Program. At AYLF, I had the amazing opportunity to work on my passion for equity in education, and I'm excited to continue to do work in that field later on. And I'm thrilled to be co-moderating this session with my new friend, Yalem Enqubahry.
Thank you, Abdul. My name is Yalem Enqubahry, and I currently attend Loyola University Chicago, majoring in neuroscience. As someone who aspires to attend medical school, some of my passions include expanding access to healthcare to low-income communities and also improving quality of healthcare in countries in the global south. I'm associated with the Aspen Institute through the Aspen Challenge, which I had the fortune of partaking in 2016. And this experience really taught me that you're never too young to make a difference. So I'm really excited for our session today with intersectional environmental activist Leah Thomas. The purpose of Youth Lead Now is to serve as a platform to amplify the voices of young people, to bring national leaders into conversation with local communities, and also provide a source for hope and inspiration as we navigate through these very difficult times. Essentially, we want to bring a bit of the Aspen experience into the homes of youth, families, and educators around the country and the globe.
And before we begin, we want to express a huge thank you to the more than 25 community organizations joining us today. We want to give shout outs to Memphis Music Initiative, 8 Million Stories, Communitopia, and Basil Scholar Program. It's time to get the show started. We'll begin with some opening thoughts from our featured guests and then shift to taking some questions. We do have a few notes for maximizing your experience. You can use the chat feature for any technical issues, and then you can also use the Q&A feature when we're asking questions. We ask that you please start your submissions with your name and your location.
So without further ado, we are so thrilled to introduce Leah Thomas. Leah is an intersectional environmental activist and a youth communicator based in Southern California. She is passionate about advocating for and exploring the relationship between social justice and environmentalism, having launched intersectionalenvironmentalist.com, a platform dedicated to dismantling systems of oppression in the environmental movement. Leah has quickly established herself as a leading figure speaking out against climate injustices disproportionately affecting the most vulnerable communities on Earth. Leah joined the Aspen family when she gave a big idea during the digital Aspen Ideas Festival this summer, and we're thrilled to have her back with us for the session of the Youth Lead Now. Leah, welcome to Youth Lead Now. We're very excited for this conversation and would love to begin with you giving us a little bit of background on yourself and your work.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. I'm super excited to be here with you all. Yeah, I guess I'll just get into it. A couple of things about me. I was born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri, and I know some people on the call are from Chicago and Illinois and Missouri and close by from the Midwest. Hey. I grew up in Florissant, Missouri, and I was really passionate about science from a really young age, particularly ecosystems, ecology. That was really just something I loved and gravitated to, and I really wanted to go to California, so I applied to a small college called Chapman, and I started studying biology my freshman year in college, and that was 2013. And then I wasn't really gravitating with my classes. I seemed to like the classes where I really got to focus on the environment, climate change, and that sort of research. And I saw there was an environmental science and policy major. So when I was back home in Florissant, the summer of 2014, I decided to think about what I wanted to do, and I changed my major to environmental science and policy. And that was about 2 weeks before I was going to go back to school and start my classes as an environmental science major. I was so pumped and so ready to go back to school. And unfortunately, during that summer, I'll never really forget that day. I had a friend call me and ask me if I knew a teenager who was quite lovely by the name of Michael Brown. My mom is a school counselor in the Ferguson-Florissant School District, and now she's the lead social worker. But Ferguson is very close to my heart, and I did not know Michael Brown personally, but I'm sure he was just a couple of circles of friends away, and he was shot and killed while he was unarmed by a police officer. And I was there for that, and then I had to go back to school and begin my classes as an environmental science and policy major. And to me, it was really difficult. While my sister was actively protesting for my civil rights in the streets of Ferguson and being tear gassed and, you know, inhaling in a lot of smoke. And then I'm in my classes learning about the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act. And as I started to dive into the environmental justice data of who experienced environmental hazards the most, it maybe would have been a coincidence if, you know, Black people and people of color and low-income communities experienced environmental injustice, like maybe one at higher rates. But when I looked at the data, it was all of them in the United States, whether that's access to clean air, access to clean water, proximity to toxic waste sites, proximity to landfills, on and on. So the more I read about the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act, while my town was being engulfed in flames, similarly to what happened this year with the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement, I had the question, who is the Clean Air Act if it isn't for my community? Who is the Clean Water Act for if it isn't for communities in Flint? And I realized I wanted a new type of environmentalism that really advocated for environmental justice. And it wasn't seen as just an optional add-on. But of course, that was a long time ago, 6 years ago at this point. So at that time, I decided to take a couple internships, apply for a few internships with the National Park Service, and just really dive into environmentalism and what it meant. And my first internship was at Nicodemus National Historic Site. Shout out to anyone if you know that site, but it's the smallest or one of the smallest national parks in the United States. And it's in the middle of rural Kansas in a farming community. And that town was so important to me and my identity because it was started by African Americans after the end of slavery. And it's the first town west of the Mississippi that was created by African Americans. And they had their own post office and their own school and their own church. And while I was there examining the dugouts in the dirt that people lived in, I really just had this moment that, wow, the National Park Service system, the national parks are also a part of my culture. And it was so beautiful to be in that space right after Ferguson, where I could just learn about this beautiful farming community that's often forgotten about. And the following summer, I had an internship with the National Park Service. Also, it was at the White House Visitor Center during the last year of the Obama presidency. And that was another really cool cultural moment for me. I remember walking past the White House every day to the Visitor Center and giving Secret Service a little like dab. They're like, hey, Leah, it made me feel really cool. And going to work and seeing the first Black president. And it was just really, really cool to be able to experience my cultural history through the National Park Service system. And again, it reaffirmed in my mind that even though the outdoors is often defined as skiing and going to all these places, even national parks, that conservation culture thrives in so many minority cultures as well. And it might just have a different name. But I thought about all of my grandmother's holistic healing practices and her drawer full of plastic bags that she reused for years and years and years, and all of our outdoor experiences, even if it was just sitting on her porch in North St. Louis and catching fireflies. All of that is conservation culture. All of that is environmentalism. And it really just got the wheels turning for me that, again, there needed to be a new type of environmentalism. So I started writing about environmental justice, sustainability on my own blog, and I was having a lot of fun building that up. I wanted to work in policy, and then a couple changes to the office made me try to find ways that I could be even more effective in policy and work outside the system and be policy adjacent. So I worked at Patagonia, the clothing company. They're one of the most, in my opinion, sustainable and ethical companies that use their money to help support grassroots environmental activism. So I worked on their PR and communications team for 2 years. And at the same time, I was building my blog, Green Girl Leah, where I would explore the relationship between nature, the environment, and social justice through the lens of a lot of different issue areas, from sustainable fashion to ethical manufacturing, on and on. And I was working at Patagonia. I thought that was it. That was my dream company. I was so happy and so thankful to be in that space. I was one of the only Black people in that space. And to be honest, I didn't realize how much of myself that I was silencing, because I thought that I was just so lucky to have a foot in the door at the place that I had always wanted to be at. And I know for other people of color, first generation students, low income students, sometimes we arrive at this university, we arrive at this job, and we think, I need to shrink myself to be small because I just feel so thankful to be here. But because of COVID, I was furloughed from my position actually, and I had a lot of time to think about who I actually am, what I actually stand for. And at the same time, the George Floyd protests were happening, and there's this really big resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement that made me think about my community back home, what I experienced in Ferguson. And I started to realize that the environmental community, the same community that I went to climate marches, I went to a march for endangered salmon. And yet many environmentalists were not standing up for endangered Black and brown lives. And something just got to me in that moment. And I realized there was an urgent need for environmentalists to take action and understand that Black and brown lives matter and are endangered, and that we need to do our part as environmentalists to make sure that they're protected, because I could no longer go forward with the quote unquote progressive environmentalism that didn't acknowledge the ways that people of color, Black, Indigenous people of color, have largely influenced the environmental movement that we have today. Without some of the research by so many Black and brown people, without Indigenous wisdom of so many people, we wouldn't even be able to understand ecosystems, ecology, and agriculture the way that we do. So I just had a moment where I thought about Kimberly Crenshaw, who created intersectional theory in 1989 or 1990. And intersectionality as a framework explores the ways that multiple parts of our identities might overlap, from race to gender to sexuality to culture to religion. All of those parts of ourselves influence the way that we get to experience both privileges and prejudices. And also, I realize that it largely shapes the way that we're able to experience a relationship with Mother Nature. And I think nature should be for us all, regardless of race, regardless of wealth. And that's not the case. Not everyone has equal access to it. So as the social justice movement was colliding with my furlough and me loving the environment and all these things happening at the same time, I decided to make a post on social media. I had 13,000 followers. I was so proud. It took me like 5 years to get to that point. So I thought my blog, again, was the tippy top. I didn't think it was going any further. But I posted a little Instagram post that said environmentalist for Black Lives Matter. And in the next slide, it had my definition of something I like to call intersectional environmentalism, which is a type of environmentalism that advocates for the protection of both people and the planet. And it doesn't silence or minimize those inequalities. And instead, it actually uplifts the voices of people of color, people in the LGBTQ+ community and disabled community, and so on, who are currently doing this work, and allows them to lead the movements that they've created. So I'm sure people have put those two words together, but my definition is, having a moment, but I'm not trying to say I'm the only one. But yeah, and I didn't think that anyone would notice, but the world did, and it was really cool. And all of a sudden I put my phone down, and in the course of a week or two, I had over 100,000 followers, and I had a lot of people asking me, how can I do this? How can I be an intersectional environmentalist? Or I had a lot of Black, Indigenous people of color who have been fighting for against climate change and climate injustice for years say, wow, this is it. This is what I want to do. Maybe it's our moment now. And that still gives me goosebumps right now. But we were able to build a community. It wasn't just about that post for me. And then I got together with a couple environmental activists and said, how can we make this moment, this viral moment, a movement? How can we make this something that will change environmentalism and the future of environmentalism? I don't know if I can do it, but I sure as heck can't do it alone. So how about we pull together 20 of some amazing, diverse environmental activists, some who are Two-Spirit, some that are First Nations, some that are indigenous to the US, some that have, are from Kenya. We pulled together this awesome group of environmentalists and made an Intersectional Environmentalist Council. And then we made a website because everyone was asking us, what do I read? What do I watch? What do I do? Who do I support? So we made a website that's growing to provide people with resources about environmentalism through different identity groups. And we made an Instagram. No advertisement, but we have grown a community of over 100,000 people in less than 2 months. And it's really cool just to see how this is going. But that's a little bit about me. That's a little bit about Intersectional Environmentalist and this movement that's kind of growing. And yeah, thank you so much for letting me share my story.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh, that was so amazing. Thank you so much for those words. I love getting to hear about the journey, and wishing you the best of luck as well. Now we're moving into questions, but before we go into live questions from the audience, we do have a few questions for you ourselves. So jumping into the first question, we have a lot of aspiring young leaders here in the audience as well, and I'm sure they're trying to navigate this work-life balance, and they're trying to ensure that they can have friends, but they also want to make a change in the world, and they want to spend time with their family, spend time with their friends. As a young person who has been sprung into the center of this movement, do you have any recommendation for finding that balance and avoiding burnout?
Yeah, I'd like to say I have a perfect formula, but I think over time I've realized that there isn't one, but you really just need to make sure you're prioritizing your well-being. It kind of helps that my mom is a therapist / social worker, so mental health is something that I just think is incredibly important. And in order to give yourself to the world and to create change, you really need to nourish your cup first. So for me, for example, I have a calendar that I live out of. And in that calendar, every day I pencil in time for lunch, I pencil in time for a walk, or I pencil in time to talk to my friends. And some of my friends, it might seem really adultish and weird, but we have time in our calendars that we check up on each other every day. And it helps me to be able to prioritize that. And a support system is so incredibly important, and realizing that not all the time will your family be that support system. And I found that sometimes, but there are ways to be able to create a support system, create a family of friends, of peers, or something like that. I use Bumble BFF, and I met one of my best friends a couple of years ago, and we go to protests together. We go knocking on doors to get people to vote. But yeah, just making sure you have a support system to really nourish your cup, because this work is incredibly draining. Advocating for social justice and environmental justice is not a one-time thing. It takes time. Change is really incremental, and bureaucracy is very slow. So making sure taking time to step back, and then also realizing that even when things seem very black and white to you and kind of good and bad, people are just raised differently. I don't think that it should be controversial to say that Black Lives Matter. I don't think that it should be controversial to say that Black and brown people deserve clean water in the United States. That's the least controversial thing that I could say. But you'd be surprised the comments that I get from people who think that everything that I'm saying is just a bunch of baloney. And you'd be surprised if I admitted, and I'm kind of embarrassed, how much time I've spent engaging with people in the comments, trying so hard to convince them. And I, as a communicator, have tried everything. Maybe not everything, but I've tried shaming people. You're a terrible person because you don't believe. I've tried guilting people. Well, if you don't believe it, I don't know. I've tried guilting. I've tried being compassionate, Leah from California. I've tried that. I've tried, you know, all these different things, from code switching to speaking directly. If people aren't ready to get it, they're not ready to get it. And we are not divine beings that can force someone to believe what we do. So I think that's also really important in terms of self-care, like knowing when to engage and when not to engage, and how to spend your time engaging with things that really matter to you, and yeah, just protecting your energy a little bit.
Thank you, Leah, for your insight. I learned a lot from that. So my question to you is regarding environmental attitudes, such as people, like, I guess, reducing one's, like, how much one uses, like how much water usage one uses, and also like driving eco-friendly cars, like making those conscious decisions. Do you think that those environmental attitudes stem from environmental privilege? And if so, how do you think environmentalists can dismantle their own privileges?
Yeah, I had a really good, I'll give you an example of when someone checked me, and they needed to, because I was on a crusade about plastic straws a couple years ago. I actually put a bunch of reusable straws in a bunch of locations around California to get people to stop using plastic straws, and it was a lot of fun. But I remember I kept telling everyone, stop using plastic straws, until someone sent me a direct message and said, Leah, I have a disability and I need to use plastic straws. I can use a plant-based plastic straw, but I need to use a straw that is plastic because I need it for survival. And I had a moment where I, as a currently able-bodied individual, didn't realize that my black or white thinking, when it came to sustainability, it isn't an all or nothing. And there are so many exceptions to that. And also, in addition to that, water bottles. I, of course, love my reusable water bottle, but there are communities like Flint that don't have clean water to drink. So I'm not going to demonize someone because they're making a choice for their own survival. And it seems like that demonizing is often targeted towards people who are low income or are from an underamplified group of people. And a long time ago, when I started studying environmental science, if someone were to ask me, what does an environmentalist look like? I would say a tall, skinny, white woman who has mason jars and the best glass Tupperware there is. Because that's what it looks like online. And they have a hybrid car, and it's the best car in the world, and they use all the reusable water bottles, but that's not it. And that's where intersectionality comes into place, because like you said, that's coming from a place of privilege to be able to afford the finest Tupperware. You can't buy a sustainable lifestyle. That is incredibly, just counterintuitive. That's not the thing. And I really want to, with intersectional environmentalists, change the way that people are viewing those things, and making sure that it's not coming from a place of privilege or just people with wealth they're shaming people by saying, look at me, I'm better, I'm a better person because I'm doing this, that, and the other. Because that, in comparison to the extractive fossil fuel industry, okay, mason jars are cute, but there are other things that we could be focusing on as well. But to agree with your question, yes, I think it does come from a place of privilege a lot of the time, and that people could maybe try to be a little bit more compassionate when it comes to barriers to entry. Whether that's looking at barriers to entry to the outdoors, who has access to clean, green spaces to be outdoors and enjoy, or barriers to entry in the sustainability field or in STEM fields and things like that. I think people could take it one step further. And with intersectionality, I think people can definitely do that.
Thank you, Leah, for your response. I always think about this, especially like when thinking about countries like that don't have all of these resources. So I learned a lot from that. So now I know that youth, families, and educators have a lot to ask. So let's jump into the questions. First, we'd like to go to the audience for a few live audio questions. For our first question, let's go to Sway Velasquez, who's an Aspen Challenge alum from Louisville, Kentucky.
So our friend Sway is having a little trouble with his technology, but he sent me his question. So I'm going to ask it for him. Leah, Sway is wondering, tell us about the process of starting your organization. What has been the most difficult parts and what has been the most rewarding? And in hindsight, is there anything you would do differently?
It's a great question. I think things kind of happened at an expedited point for me because I previously worked in PR and communications. So I understand when there's a moment, how to utilize that moment to be able to get people to take action. And I was having this personal moment where people were saying, ooh, what is intersectional environmentalism? Who is this girl? And in that moment, so we had to act very quickly to have a website because we wanted to legitimize intersectional environmentalism. I didn't want it just to be a post. So we had to put up a website, get an Instagram page, make it look fun, but legitimate enough so people would be interested in it. We're like, can we trick people to thinking this has like been in academia for a while? And I think we did, which is kind of cool. But in terms of like the structural thing, it can be very difficult to start an organization. We're having a lot of thoughts about whether we wanted to proceed as a for-profit or a nonprofit. Both of those things require a lot of paperwork and filing with the Secretary of State. There are, because of COVID, it might take a really long time. Some mistakes that I think I made is sometimes a lot of people, when you're doing something that, you know, is resonating with a lot of people, I had a lot of people approach me wanting to talk, wanting to get involved in different things like that. And there were a lot of opportunities where people kind of said that they wanted to do all these things, fund our work, put me in a TV show, like all of these sorts of things. And they kind of fell through, I guess. So I don't say that that's a mistake necessarily, but maybe being a little bit too optimistic sometimes about people's intentions. And then, yeah, we are set up currently as a for-profit, but we're pursuing fiscal sponsorship and also launching a foundation arm next year. And I can get into that a little bit later about why we chose to be a for-profit if anyone's interested. Yeah.
Thank you so much. We have some more questions from the Q&A feature. The first one reads, how are you making meaning of how to plan for the future, your career, and your passions and your path forward in a context that feels so destabilized? How do you stay sane and hopeful?
Again, my mom's a therapist, so I've got a therapist. She's great. It's really nice. I really try my best to prioritize self-care and just take time. And I understand that's coming from a place of privilege, especially because, you know, I haven't always had healthcare, and I remember how expensive it was to have access to some of those things. But I really try to do my best to make sure my support system is very strong. Again, family doesn't always have to be my support system. I have some friends that I can talk to and really disconnect, and also having friendships that are based in more than just intersectional environmentalism and social justice. I have friends where we talk about 90 Day Fiance, you know, it's a great show. We talk about Real Housewives of Atlanta, things that have nothing to do with the fight for social justice and making the future intersectional. So I stay sane by allowing myself to experience joy, because I think joy is a radical act. Rest is an act of resistance. All of these things will help move progress forward. So by taking care of myself to the best of my ability, I can go out into this world and do what I want to do.
And our next question is from Ben Correa Harker from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And it reads, I've heard you share several stories where you noticed things about yourself, such as what courses you were drawn to and what that meant about your passion, as well as making connections between different ideas, such as associating intersectionality and environmentalism. What practices or habits do you have that help you to make meaning in your own life, or connections between different concepts, movements, or ideas?
Yeah, I think I was at a time where like so many things were happening at once. And I think Gen Z is probably really familiar with that. Living through 2020, there's economic inequality, like a healthcare crisis. There's so many things happening at once that it almost feels overwhelming to me if I have to focus on, okay, today I'm going to read about the economy. Today I'm going to read about like religion. Today I'm going to do this. And instead of realizing, okay, there's so much inequality that's happening at once, maybe there are ways that these things are connected. And by focusing in on me, particularly, I usually focus in on race and systemic like racial inequality and finding where that exists in different sectors. I think that has helped me kind of stay focused and see the interconnections of those things. And you can also explore it in other areas as well. Like if you want to zone in on feminism, or if you want to zone in on, you know, homophobia or advocacy for LGBTQ plus rights, like, or gender, sexuality, you can zero in on one thing and find how it impacts a lot of other things. And I think that helps make the connections a little bit clearer.
Questions keep rolling in. We have another question from Patrick Randolph in Madison, Wisconsin. Reads, what are some small steps we can take to help with the climate crisis, specifically for BIPOC, who are affected most greatly? And how do you encourage we turn those small steps into consistent action?
That's a great question. I think I always like to say progress is better than perfection when it comes to sustainability, and going from 0 to 100 is hard. Okay, so you don't have to throw everything away that you have that's not made of glass. In my opinion, the first step is looking through your house, seeing what you already have, and trying to use it for as long as possible. So if you have plastic Tupperware and maybe it's got a little dent in it and you were thinking about buying some more plastic Tupperware, don't, just keep the one with the dent. So really look through your house, see what you have. Clothing, I think something that I really love is making sure I can extend the wearability of clothing. So getting a little sewing kit if you can, trying to teach yourself how to sew so you can fix things up. And I think by not consuming as much, that will really help your carbon footprint, which is just one thing you can do at home. Repurposing and reusing and recycling the things that you have. If you do have to get a plastic or paper bag, you know, get it. It's a pandemic. They're not always allowing you to use them, but use it as a trash can, use it as storage, find ways to repurpose materials. In addition to that, I think something that's really great to see is a lot of urban farming practices, a lot of farming, like, you know, not farming at home, but having a little indoor garden or something like that. I really believe in regenerative agriculture, regenerative organic agriculture, and its ability to basically capture carbon from the atmosphere and put it back into the soil, which is really cool. And I think that would be a great solution for a lot of BIPOC communities that are being faced with pollution issues. And yeah, finding solutions like that to make spaces a little bit better, I guess, you know, so you can go outside and explore and have that. And really advocating for green spaces in all neighborhoods.
Okay, and then next question is, can you tell us about the function of the Intersectional Environmentalism Council and what they're playing in the movement right now? Who are those people that were chosen to be on the council?
Yeah, we have about 22 people, might go up a little bit more, but basically what I wanted to do is just show that there are other people that have been here doing this work. Because what I get afraid of is when people start waking up and they're like, racism is a thing. I know Black people have been saying it forever, but now I see it. And it's like, they want to spring into action and like save people all of a sudden. And they ask the question like, well, how can I save these people? And to stop that from happening, I wanted to say like, look, here's 20 people who have been doing this for years. One of them, Teresa Baker, the founder of the Outdoor CEO Diversity Pledge, has been doing this for probably like 20 years. Jose, the founder of Latino Outdoors, has been doing this for probably 20 years as well. So I wanted to provide, also it's been really helpful. A lot of brands, I used to work for an outdoor brand, and they used to say, oh, we can never find people of color that hike. And I'm like, you all aren't looking, here's 20. So it's been really nice seeing brands approaching all of those people, finding people they can work with for partnerships, finding people whose nonprofits they can support. And I just really wanted to make the case that with intersectional environmentalism, it's not about reinventing the wheel, it's about finding the people who are doing the work. Because each of those 20 council members, they have friends, and they have friends and friends of friends who all care about the same stuff. And really it can be as simple as following one of those people on social media, learning a little bit about them. For example, a council member that is really great, I love all of them, they're all great, but they have an account called Queer Nature, and they are an Indigenous, disabled, two-spirit environmental activists, which is one of the most intersectional things that I have ever heard of. And they have such a cool story to tell that I think needs to be shared. And because of them, I can make sure that I'm using the right language, just learning from other people. And so I guess the purpose of it, one, was to create community for ourselves, because all of us on the council needed something like this. Like, I needed something like this when I was working at Patagonia, when there were maybe only 2 other Black people. I wanted to know other minorities in this space, and I wanted to be able to talk to them every month so we can have some sort of check-in. And then the second thing, the purpose of it, is to make sure that we're amplifying all of their work, because that's awesome. So we share the efforts that they're already doing instead of reinventing the wheel, and making sure that we can be a community and empower each other. And I wanted to show people in a really major way that we are not competing with each other. We all have different attitudes and methods for the work that we do. But I think all of those things are valid. And I want to show people, even if someone is more of a Malcolm X type, or if someone is more of a Martin Luther King Jr. type, like, we can still be on the same council and see the value in everyone's work. So that's part of it. And then the last part is, it's an accountability metric and structure for intersectional environmentalists, because we don't know everything. I am very focused, I think, on Black identity, but sometimes I don't know a lot about what's going on for Alaskan Natives, or I don't know a lot about what's going on internationally. So we have people who are from the UK, or a girl who grew up in Kenya, and we can talk about different things that are happening, and they can keep us accountable to make sure the content that we're sharing is something that should be shared, which is really cool.
Yeah, and I definitely think you made an important point about finding people who are already doing the work, like you said. The next question says, adults are often spotting youth activism. What advice do you have for parents and educators who want to support young people's engagement without constraining it?
Yeah, something that I've seen lately is, like, I've met children who are activists, and I'm like, did your mom make you do this? You know, like, I'll be like, where are you okay? You know, like, just making sure that kids can be kids, because I'm 25. So thankfully, this is something that I chose for myself. And there are a lot of children who choose activism, but making sure, because I understand as a 25-year-old how much pressure it is to suddenly be given, like, a platform of hundreds of thousands of people who are following everything that I do. And I can't even imagine what that's like for a 13-year-old climate activist, or, and many times, specifically speaking about the child activists who are survivors of, you know, tragedies, and then being like gun rights activists, or something like, not gun rights, like anti-gun activists, or things like that. Making sure that children can be children as well when they're doing their activism. So not putting too much pressure on them to save humankind, because the people who should really be saving humankind are the adults with resources who are voting at higher rates, and not, I guess, placing all of that on children, but to support their efforts. I think definitely funding their work if you can do so, providing them with resources. I've had a lot of people who have led me in the direction of, like, a pro bono legal person, you know, or they've offered pro bono, which is free, like, mentorship sessions for me and the IE team. And that's been really valuable to have, because we don't really have the funds currently to be able to afford top tier lawyers or the best resources for all that stuff as a startup. So I think one of the best things is offering resources if they want it, supporting their different campaigns and initiatives, sharing it on social media, but most importantly, allowing children to still be children, and making sure we aren't placing the fate of the earth onto this younger generation, and doing our part as adults to make sure that we are righting the wrongs of the past with the privilege that we have as adults.
Okay, and then our next question is from Ali Heiselman from Houston, Texas. She asks, what do you say to those who try to discredit or dismiss your leadership based specifically because of your age?
I ignore them. Just kidding. I mean, I do. The thing is, you know, oh well. I mean, I try. People will complain about everything, you know, they will. And that's something that I really didn't like on the opposite end of the last question with like Greta, the climate activist. People used to say, oh, she doesn't even know what she's thinking. Yes, she does. She does in so many ways. You know, I had thoughts and opinions when I was 13, when I was in high school, when I was in college. So people who are saying that, I think it's very silly. And if that's how they'd like to be, then that's how they'd like to, they can continue to be that way. But I've had to realize that this movement will move forward, and the fight for social justice and equality and saving the planet will move forward regardless of someone who doubts me just because I'm younger. And I understand I'm naive because there's so much more life for me to live. Even as a 20-something, I'm going to think different things a year from now. I could have never imagined my life would be here a year before, especially 2 years before when I was in college. Absolutely not. I didn't think about this. Also, sorry, a train is going by. But I think, I don't know. I just don't really think about them too much. And I don't like to give people too much of my energy to like ruin my joy, because I try to think back to my grandparents who were alive during the civil rights movement and during that time. I think it was something like 60% of Americans at that time, 60% of Americans did not believe in what Martin Luther King Jr. was doing. And if over 50% of Americans thought that Martin Luther King Jr. himself at a point was too radical, there's no way that I'm going to win over certain people, you know, if they could doubt people back then. So I guess hindsight is 2020. It's 2020, and hopefully 20 years from now, people will look back and think that what I'm doing and other youth activists is doing is really cool. And if they don't, oh well, but at least I gave it a shot.
Thank you so much for that. The next question reads, Leah, you're amazing. Knowing this is a pandemic era, what advice do you have for recent bachelor's degree graduates who focus their passions on environmental studies and sustainability to find a career in today's time of local recruitment only or remote roles only? And how do you recommend we stay motivated when we continue to receive rejections?
Yeah, it's really hard right now. And I understand, like, I don't know, intersectional environmentalist was kind of an anomaly. At that point, I was basically unemployed and on unemployment and trying to figure my life out, as I know a lot of people are right now. And it's hard to stay focused, but one thing is it's an amazing opportunity if people can to volunteer if they'd like to help out other nonprofits. A website that I really love, it's called Upwork, and you can do like different freelance projects through Upwork. And I think it's also an incredible opportunity to potentially, if you'd like, start something for yourself. I think if the pandemic weren't happening, I don't think intersectional environmentalists would exist. But I've been seeing a lot of really incredible Instagram pages and websites kind of pop up. And I think if that's something that you want to do, maybe exploring that for yourself, like a blog or something online or a website, or kind of creating your own business if that's something that you want to do. And then staying tuned for intersectional environmentalist job opportunities and internships because they're coming. So.
Thank you for your response. Okay, our next question is from John in Chicago, Illinois. He asks, how do you think through what to prioritize in intersectional work when there are so many issues that intersect with race, like criminal justice reform, environmentalism, etc.?
Yeah, for me, I mean, it's hard because I focus a lot of my time on environmentalism because I feel like that's one piece of the puzzle, you know, and I kind of will overwhelm myself if I'm looking at environmentalism through an intersectional approach. If I spent a lot of my time on other issues at the same time. And I've received comments when I post about environmentalism, like, well, what about this? And what about this? And what about this? What about this topic? Do you not care? Like, obviously I care, but I think for my own like focus and being able to make impact in this area, I would love to hopefully make a big impact in the environmental justice area and hopefully empower other people to make big intersectional impacts in other areas like healthcare, criminal justice reform. And like we said, all of those issues intersect. And I think if different people can look at these issues intersectionally, they'll help move it forward. But to be honest, I do care about all of these other things, and I focus on, you know, different social justice problems, but I have to be real with myself and my own well-being and my own bandwidth. And I think it makes me a little bit happier when I get to focus on environmentalism a little bit more. And then I also realize that it's okay, because that's also like a very urgent thing. I don't know, helping save the planet. So it's okay to focus on like kind of one issue area. And of course, there'll be people who aren't super happy with that one issue area that you've kind of chosen. But I think it helps me make progress when I can do that.
The next question says, I'm loving seeing 3 brilliant young people on this call, each in different fields with different passions. How can we come together as a generation to advocate collectively and leverage our shared power? What are you seeking work as you're organized? I think that's a typo.
Oh yeah. What was that last part?
What are you seeking work as you organize?
Maybe it's what am I seeing work as I organize? I think, what I'm seeing work, I guess, from that comment, like there are so many incredible young people doing incredible things, and realizing how if we unite together, we can make a bigger impact. And that was the important part of the Intersectional Environmentalist Council, showing that we can work together. And something else that we're exploring, sneak preview, some sort of alliance maybe with some other youth-led environmental organizations that are already out there doing a lot of stuff, maybe ones that are, you know, fighting for the Green New Deal and rhyme with Unrise, and a couple other organizations that we are going to hopefully create an alliance with that already exists, because they're doing cool work. And again, we're not in competition to save the planet, and we're not in competition to make life easier for people of color. We want to do it together. So I think finding those avenues of synergy, like, and realizing that I'm not competing with other people, and instead we can do a lot of great things together, and just keeping that in mind, I think has really helped push intersectional environmentalists forward, and helped raise funds and resources for other efforts that might need them.
And then our next question is from Cara Minardi. Thank you, Leah, for sharing your story. Where do you hope the Intersectional Environmentalism platform will be in 10 years from now?
That's a great question. I mean, I would love if the world would open back up. We would love to have some sort of events in person. We'd love to explore what it would look like to do some sort of conference that's very accessible, because conferences can get really expensive, and exploring what it would look like to do those sorts of things and build community in person. Something that we're exploring similarly to Sunrise is creating hubs. So having college chapters, high school chapters, middle school chapters if people want them, but ways for people to connect on a local level. And we'd love to help people when it comes to policy decisions, both locally and, you know, across the nation. But yeah, I think we'd love to explore how we can build community and help people feel empowered in their local communities. And that's probably our main focus. In addition to that, we're definitely exploring long form and short form media. So potentially looking at how we can better tell stories through like documentary filmmaking and things like that, and really expanding our media arm. So that's something that we're doing. And I'd hope that 10 years from now, we've got it down, because I'm sure there's going to be some trials and errors along the way, but yeah.
Wishing you the best of luck in all of those 10 years. Now we're going to move to our last audio question. For our last question, we're moving to Bree Robles from St. Louis, Missouri.
Oh, St. Louis, hey.
Okay, sorry, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, awesome. I just wanted to start out by saying thank you for being here and sharing your time with us. So for the past 2 years, I feel like I've been on like a somewhat isolating journey of like self-discovery and like returning to nature and like learning more about sustainability. And then now I'm entering my senior year of college during a pandemic, global climate change, dualistic political warfare, et cetera, et cetera. So I was just wondering, what is your North Star that keeps you aligned to your purpose and like your work that you do?
I definitely feel that comment. I think my North Star is my family, like the resilience of Black people in this country and globally, I think keeps me going. And like, I'm so blessed that I still have my great grandmother and my grandma and my mom, my sister. So that's 4 generations of Black women that I can look to and think about, you know. And as an activist, I mean, my grandparents, my mom used to take us to protests when I was like 2. And I'm so thankful for that experience. But when I talk about the Black Lives Matter movement, I get context from my great grandma who never thought that Obama could be president. I get context from my grandmother who lived through the civil rights movement and is still experiencing Black girl joy. And I think about that, and I think about my great grandmother's smile and my grandma when she loves to dance, and my mom being able to experience joy still, even after everything that they've been through, which in so many ways is more than what I've been through. And their joy, I think, is my North Star that keeps me going, and just the resilience of so many Black, Indigenous, and people of color who still continue to rise. Even though life and society has been really hard. But I could be wrong, who knows? But I don't think that the right side of history is one that actively oppresses people. And I also, when I think about the past, I think about the future as my North Star. And there's no way that textbooks are going to say that people who can't admit that Black Lives Matter were wrong. So, I mean, we're right. The people who can't admit it are right. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for answering all those questions. We love the insight that you just gave us. We're going to quickly transition into the lightning round questions. We got to learn a lot about Leah the activist, so now we want to learn about Leah as a person. So we're going to ask you just 9 random questions. Yeah, so I guess we'll just jump right in. What has been your favorite quarantine binge so far?
I've been watching the show The Umbrella Academy.
Oh, that's
really good. Yeah, it's really good. I thought it was like a kid's show for some reason. Like really good.
Yeah.
It's great.
No.
My question is, what's your favorite city in the US?
My favorite city in the US is probably Malibu, California. It's really beautiful. The beaches are beautiful.
What's your favorite social media site or your go-to social media site?
I love TikTok, and I hope Trump doesn't ban it. It just helps me disconnect every night. That's kind of my routine. I do my activism stuff, and then I just like watch TikTok.
Feel free to plug in your TikToks or your Instagrams too.
Okay. I'll do
that. What's the last song you listened to that really got you going?
I mean, it's kind of funny because I think people kind of assume that I just listen to like Mumford and Sons, or like I listen to like Corinne Bailey Rae all day, and I love them, but I really love Meg Thee Stallion. She gets me going, and I love, it's hard to pick a song. It's really hard to pick a song, but like any Meg Thee Stallion song, or currently Tap In by Saweetie. It's a great song.
Those are good songs. If you could be reincarnated as anything, what would it be?
If I could be reincarnated as anything, I would definitely say probably a human that's like slightly taller.
Any ideal height, or?
I would say like maybe 5'7". I'm 5'3", and I think 5'7" just sounds like a perfect height.
The next question is, would you rather be able to speak every language in the world or be able to talk to animals?
I think I would rather speak every language in the world. Just as a writer and as a communicator, I think like that would be so cool.
Your favorite fruit or vegetable, if that makes it easier.
I love beets. Beets are incredible. I love their really like earthy taste. Yeah, I love beets.
What's your favorite ice cream flavor?
Probably just chocolate, straight up chocolate.
Same.
Well, that wraps up the lightning round question. Thank you so much for doing that with us. And just want to thank you again for joining and teaching us both about what it's like to be thrown into the leader of the movement and teaching us all about intersectional environmentalism. And I know we're excited to see what you're going to do in the future. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For having me.
But before the rest of us go, we'd like to end with a few words from the late Representative John Lewis with his essay, "Together You Can Redeem the Soul of Our Nation." He wrote this essay for the New York Times, and it was published on the day of his funeral. "Though I may not be here with you, I urge you to answer the highest calling of your heart and stand up for what you truly believe. In my life, I have done all I can to demonstrate that the way of peace, the way of love and nonviolence is a more excellent way. Now it is your turn to let freedom ring. When historians pick up their pens to write the story of the 21st century, let them say that it was your generation who laid down the heavy burdens of hate at last, and that peace finally triumphed over violence, aggression, and war. So I say to you, walk with the wind, brothers and sisters, and let the spirit of peace and the power of everlasting love be your guide." Now, what I took from this piece is that racial injustices are seen in every facet of our world, and they affect all of us. And if we as a collective want to help protect our environment, we have to recognize the institutions that prevent us from progressing in order to combat the racist policies and power structures while advocating for environmental justice peacefully.
And taking the words of the late Representative John Lewis, I inspire to stand up for what I believe in. And I want to implore all of you who are viewing today to continue to stand up for what you believe in. And lastly, I want to thank Leah for exemplifying and teaching us how to do that.
We'd also like to thank all of you for joining our conversation today with Leah, and we'd greatly appreciate it if you could take some of your time to fill out a short survey. We want your feedback on topics, speakers, and formats that you'd like to see in the future, and you can access this from the QR code on the screen or via the email being sent to you after the program.
Also, a recording of this session will be posted for use, and resources on how to continue the conversation are also available via our website.
We'll be back in September with another edition, and we hope that you join us again.
Again, thank you to the audience for attending, to our community partners for continuing to invest in young leaders. Our hope is that Youth Leads Now is a reminder that the voices and actions of youth matter now more than ever. We are the ones who will change the world. Let's be like Leah and start now in whatever big or small way we can. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.